What's up everybody, it's Joe from Gadgetry Tech, and today I'm going to talk about a couple of headphones from Audio-Technica that recently came out. It was under embargo until today. I've had the R70xa for like 3 or 4 months now, and I've been dying to talk about it. So I'm happy to finally release this video, and the R50X recently came out as well. So I wanted to put these both together to compare it. And as you can tell, I'm also going to be comparing it against the original R70X, the R70x Refine, the ATH-R3000, and a few headphones from Sennheiser that I'll bring out after. Now, both of these headphones came from Audio-Technica for review. No monetary exchange. There's no affiliate things. I don't do special marketing links, just generic Amazon stuff like usual, but I did want to disclose that. The original R70X and the R70x Refine, which is an exclusive from APOS Audio, both of these came from APOS Audio, so huge thanks to them. Again, I won't say or influence what I say about it in the review, but I did want to disclose that. The R50X has an MSRP of $159, weighs just over a couple hundred grams, and has an impedance of only 50 ohms, making it relatively easy to drive. The ATH-R70xa is nearly double the price at $350. It has a similar weight of just under 200 grams, but the impedance is significantly higher, pushing almost 500 ohms. Thankfully, the sensitivity is a little bit higher on the R70xa, so while it is more quiet at the same amp volume setting, if you were to switch these two out, it's not super impossible to drive. It can still get quite loud, but it does favor a more powerful amp. I will get into that after though. Starting with accessories and the R50X, you get a few things in the box. One, obviously, is the headphone itself. We'll get into that shortly. And you get a leatherette pouch. Now, this looks almost more premium than what you get in the more expensive headphone, but this is a more premium, you know, like velour material. So it's almost like a velvety feeling, and it really feels premium, but this looks quite nice, and you know, any pouch at all is going to be acceptable for that kind of a price. You also get 2 cables in the box. The longer one, they both have TPU rubber, no real microphonics issues. These are very open headphones, and because of how small the cups are, the cord's not really touching your ear, but it uses a single locking mechanism. This is a 2.5 millimeter traditional Audio-Technica design where it locks into place. And then you have a 1/4-inch adapter which unscrews on the longer cable. The shorter cable, which is better suited for people who are playing at their desk, maybe you're connecting it to a controller and you're using it for console gaming, for example. It does not have a threaded connector for the 1/4-inch, but it does have this little lip right here, and because of that, I can basically just press it on. So you can still use the 1/4-inch on this short cord, but I think depending on your use case, you know, you may not need it. R70xa has a similar accessory offering. It actually has one less cable. It only comes with one. Still TPU rubber, and it uses the same termination that was found on the original R70x. These are like 2.5 millimeter equivalents, and they lock into place. Now, the headphone says which side is left and right, but the cable does not. And just in case you've never been exposed to this before on Audio-Technica headphones, these are pinned for both left and right channel on both ends. So it doesn't matter which side you plug this into, it will always be correct, and you do the right and left accordingly. So don't panic and be, you know, sitting there looking for the L and R. And just like the longer cord found on the R50X, you get a removable via a screw 3.5 to 1/4-inch or 6.3 millimeter adapter. When it comes to build quality and comfort, I want to make some comparisons to the older R70X. That was why this has been out right from the beginning. So let's talk about the R70 first, because this is the biggest change. It has something to replace. You know, it's proceeding a different model. And the design is quite different. Now, even the cup design, like the outer grill, very different as you can tell. And you have, what's new about this one is you have a telescoping yoke design, which I absolutely love. This is going to be, by the way, a very polarizing change in ergonomics, because there are things that to me are slightly better and some things that are technically a step back. Perhaps the most noticeable change over the original is the winglet design going to a suspension strap, which I think some people will find more appealing, but those who loved the winglet design, well, unfortunately, that's just not available with this particular model anymore. There are pros and cons to each of these designs. So I want to start with the original R70X. These winglet designs I actually found quite comfortable. They look more bulky when you sit like that, but when you wear it, they're balanced really well, and it kind of floats on your head. Now, ergonomically speaking, the older R70X had rotating cups, but they did not pivot. You could see it's kind of fixed. So as you open it up, you can't control the pressure of where it you can't control where it puts pressure on your head, top and bottom, only forward and back. So I think there's a pro and a con to that, and it really depended on your head shape And that's why some people found this comfortable and some people didn't. The R70xa kind of addressed that. So now they have telescoping yokes, so you have a height adjustment, which is cool. And the cups, check this out, they finally pivot in and out. The rotation is more narrow. You can see there's a little bit of movement. And if you look inside the buckle here, there's a little bit of a V-cut allowing you some rotation. I think it's just enough to still have a proper fitment, but I don't know if you just noticed or heard it, my suspension strap. This is perhaps, to me, somewhat of a design flaw with the R70xa. There is a magnet system inside the suspension strap. These are how you can adjust which part you use up top, which I thought there'd be more adjustment to work with here. I wish the strap was just slightly shorter because it would make it shorter to wear. Even on the smallest possible setting, it's like just enough when I'm wearing a hat, and if I don't have a hat, it sits just slightly low. So if you have a really small head, I don't know if it's gonna sit short enough for you. You can always play with that. But my issue is this magnet system where it folds over and attaches to the strap is kind of weak. So if I pull on this just a little, they give away, just like that. So when it looks like I actually have to put more effort on it when I'm using my thumb. However, when I wear it, if I pull down even a little bit, like you would think some headphones you pull down to adjust the yoke, this thing just gives away every single time. So sizing is a little bit of a struggle with this. If you have to adjust it, kind of adjust it offhand or off head, get it to the right setting, then put it on carefully. And the strap is definitely strong enough to support the weight of the headphone. It's only 200 grams, which is crazy light, but you just can't pull on it or that just keeps happening. Kind of drives me crazy. I think and hope that one day there's a revision where they have a stronger magnet structure, but that was a standout. The other thing I noticed is the telescoping yoke shows scrapes from the buckle. So it will wear over time. Mine's already developing a line. I've only had it for a few months. So just keep that in mind. The R50X doesn't have the same issue because the buckle shape is a little bit different. The ear pads are slightly bigger, just slightly, and they're slightly deeper. If you have the original R70X and you think that the XA is going to be a monumental change and upgrade and be significantly larger, it's not, but it is large enough where I still found it rather comfortable. My ears just kind of kissed the top and bottom of the cup, but it was enough of an upgrade to me to make it worthwhile. Now, the big selling point with the older R70 Refine is not the opening. This is still only 50 millimeters. The R70xa has a wider and taller opening, but this was deeper at over 25 millimeters deep. So if you have larger ears, your ears didn't kiss the inside of the baffle, and this felt like a bigger pad just because of that extra depth. Moving on to the R50X, they got this almost perfect. I love the design choices with this and what they did. So for one, there is no suspension strap or winglet design. They have these nuggets, which I like because one, if you ever have a hook for your headphone, that's kind of cool, and not putting pressure on the top center point on your head is very comfortable. Whether you wear a hat or not, you can technically adjust the clamp force a little bit by adjusting the bend or the radius of it because this piece right here is all flexible. This is like a TPU rubber. So it's adjustable to an extent. Now this too has telescoping yokes. The buckle has a wider opening, and you can see this does also rotate. The spring mechanism inside makes this rotation more stiff. It likes to put pressure behind your ear. I think they tuned that specifically to maintain a more consistent seal because these ear pads are smaller than the XA. They're more of the traditional diameter of the original R70X, but I love the skin feel of this pad. This uses velour, which I love. This guy uses suede. So skin feel wise, I actually like the R50X more, but as far as dimensions go, the R70xa has a bigger pad. And because this doesn't have that suspension strap of the XA, you can actually put this on, and to me, this is super, super comfortable. Both of these are lightweight. They're just over 200 grams, and they go toe-to-toe with the lightest offerings from Sennheiser. If anything, they're actually lighter. The differences with the Audio-Technica line in general is they tend to favor smaller pads, and you're going to have a widely different preference than either myself or other people because it depends on head shape and ear shape. They never feel like they're fully seated perfectly on your head. It's kind of like you put it on, I'm like, yeah, it feels pretty good. It's still very comfortable. And then after that, once you start listening to music or start gaming on it, they kind of disappear on your head and you kind of forget about it. If you're sensitive to your ears touching the baffle, these are both deep enough where it's not like a pain point. There's nothing weird protruding out. It's still relatively flat and smooth. and the skin feel and the weight still helps a lot. So to me, they're still extremely comfortable to wear. I did make my own rig for measuring clamp force of headphones. All of the Audio-Technica headphones have a super light clamp force and light weight, so it's really just if the pad dimensions work for you. They are crazy comfortable to wear for long periods of time. And I do have the Sennheiser HD560S, the new 505, which will have its own video later, but I'll make some loose comparisons to it. They soften the clamp force of the 505 compared to the 560. Both of them still have a stronger clamp force than any of the Audio-Technica headphones. The AUN AR5000 has a somewhat light clamp force, but the ear cups themselves and overall headphone is heavier. So it's just a different feeling. I do like that the pads are huge and they're very plush. But they don't feel as lightweight for long periods of gaming or listening to music that the Audio-Technica ones give you. As far as sound quality goes, I like to start with the objective measurement first because it kind of paints a picture, but it's not the exclusive way to judge a headphone. There's a lot of other factors at play here, and I'll get into that with the subjective stuff in the upcoming chapter. So I use a Gross KB006X Pentaclone with an IC711 coupler clone. I always disclose that just in case you're comparing my measurements to someone else's. Unless they have my exact rig, the measurements aren't always comparable apples to apples, so just keep that in mind. I have a ton of different measurements though of many different models, and I'll have a link in the description below for that. Let's start by comparing the R50X to the R70xa because they have a different sound tuning and it looks similar to a certain extent, but they do sound quite different when you actually wear them. They both have a similar bass emphasis. They have a nice little warm punch to them, and the bass roll-off starts at right about 50 to 60 hertz. The bass extends quite nice though, and it does handle EQ, so if you are chasing more, we can always lift that. The big difference is in the upper mid-range and low treble tuning. There's a wildly different presentation here. The R50X is just a more excited sounding headphone. You can see that as you ramp up over 1500 hertz, it has a stronger emphasis. There's also a much less of a recess in the pinna gain area. So the whole 4 to 5 kilohertz area is stronger on the R50X. The R70xa has a little bit more presence below 1500 hertz compared to the R50, but there is a little bit of a dip right around 400 hertz, and it does change the way certain things are presented. It does affect vocals. It affects pretty much all music that you listen to whenever you have a little recess like that. It's not bad, but at the end of the day, when you look at these measurements alone, just to translate it, the R50XA or X is a more excited sounding headphone. It's brighter and it's closer to the ATH-R3000 than it is the R70X and XA, which are both tuned to have a more relaxing, wider sound presentation thanks to this relaxed 4 to 5 kilohertz area. It really does make a huge difference. Now, just to show you how the R70XA compares to the older R70X, here is that measurement. It's a more excited sounding profile, to be honest. The biggest difference is the R70XA sounds a little bit brighter and more musical, but not overly so. It still kind of retains some of what made the R70X special. It just wakes it up a little bit, and this little scoop in the mids makes the bass sound a little bit more prominent, whereas the older R70 has a little bit more body to like the lower register of your voice. Certain instruments just have a little bit more warmth to them than the newer R70XA. Now, if you compare those to the Refine, which has the thicker pad, the Refine just kind of boosts that warmth a little bit more while not really changing the tonality otherwise. And because it's doing all that, it just has a smoother listen. It's not as musical or bright sounding as either of the newer Audio-Technica headphones. So if you find that it was a little bit too soft in certain things, well, these are going to be the solution to that. I wanted to quickly bring up the new Sennheiser HD505 just in case you don't go to the site. Now, the 505 has a slightly better sub-bass extension, a little bit less warmth. It sounds a little bit softer in general when you compare to the more punchy bass nature of either of the Audio-Technica headphones. Mid-range tuning is excellent. It comes across kind of like the R50X below 3000 hertz. And then it has a more relaxed vocal presentation, more in line with the Sennheiser HD6XX and the R70xa. So it's a little bit more relaxing, and they did shave off a little bit of the shouty presentation just from the way it's tuned overall compared to the older 560S. I also purchased measuring equipment to measure the electrical impedance of headphones because depending on what amplifier you have, particularly high output impedance amps such as an OTL, that can affect the tonality of some headphones, and this is what explains why that happens. So the R50X has a 50 ohm nominal impedance rating, and when you plot it, right about 70 hertz is the resonance peak of this particular driver. That means that you will get a slight, maybe 1 or 2 decibel lift depending on the output impedance of your amp. it can make the headphones sound a little bit warmer. Otherwise, it's going to sound relatively similar regardless of what amp you have. Now, the R70X and XA are totally different animals than most headphones. They have a 470 ohm nominal impedance, one of the highest impedance ratings electrically for any headphone. Then the impedance peak goes over 1,000 ohms in the lower bass region, and it extends into the low mids, like 400 or 500 hertz, where it like drops off. So the tonality of the R70 and R70XA, or the X and XA, will be impacted by very high output impedance amps. However, their impedance is so high in general that don't expect a major shift. They just seem to warm up a bit, and they soften in the high treble whenever you hook it up to a high output impedance amp. So I just wanted to disclose that. Measurements can only explain so much of the picture though, and how we hear it and what we listen to can definitely influence what our perceptions are for sound quality. And I want to start with comparing the R70XA to the older R70X and Refine. The Refine and X, the originals, were a little bit more warm sounding and a little bit more relaxed. Relaxed in a good way because they have a really wide sound presentation, but strong vocal presence wasn't really like the push point of the older R70s. That relaxed 4 to 5K area is really nice if you like to turn it up a little bit. And again, because of that impedance, you probably need a more powerful amplifier if you like listening to it at higher volumes. They're great. I never really had an issue with them. I think more people had some problems with their ergonomics than they did the sound quality. Now, where the R70XA differs from the original X and Refine is the fact that it sounds more musical, a little bit more bright and analytical. Using the term more musical is like a cop-out term. I'm not going to like dance around that. I know it sounds ridiculous to say, but if you A/B these as much as I have, I mean, I had this all set up on a bench and I'm like switching them as fast as I could. Every time I switched to the XA from the X, what stood out to me is notes sounded a little bit more resolving, and I could hear them being thrown around a little bit more around me. It just seems like everything was a little bit brighter, a little bit, I don't want to say more detailed because it has a similar resolution, but the frequency response made certain things stand out more. I actually prefer the presentation of the XA over the older R70X. And if you have an R70X and you're thinking that this is going to be a night and day difference, it is not a massive difference in presentation. The R50 is a very big difference in presentation. So if you already have an R70 and you're happy with it, maybe consider the R50 or a different model that has a different sound signature. This is more of the refined version to me than the older R70s because I feel like I can enjoy more of like the synths and EDM type stuff or things that are more lively in general. They just really come through nice on the new R70XA. I actually prefer it more. Now the bass delivery of the R70XA is insane, as was the older X, but I feel like when you have a little bit more lively presentation up top, boosting the bass slightly is a better complement. So to me, this is just a more enjoyable headphone to listen to, especially if you tend to EQ bass up a little bit. The dynamics are great. The punch is great. It sounds much more impactful than any of the Sennheiser headphones under a few $100s, and I'll compare it to those soon. But I really do like the bass delivery, and the overhead for bass is quite high with Audio-Technicas. This is no exception. I've added as much as a 6 to 8 decibel bass shelf below 80 hertz just to see what I can do when I push it to make sure there's some overhead left, because I don't usually listen to my headphones at super high volumes. So if you like bass and you like listening to it a little bit louder, on an open back, I think the R70 is incredible for that. Which leads me to the R50X, which seems to have not gotten the memo that it's only $160, because first I want to start with the sound signature and then we'll get into a couple other pretty amazing things about it. So this has almost the same bass capability as the R70XA, but it's much more sensitive. So depending on what you're connecting it to, this might sound a little bit more lively and punchy. I can EQ both of these up enough in the bass where I actually feel it interacting with my ear like a vibration sensation, which the Sennheisers don't do as much. They're a little bit softer. Now that's not to say that Sennheiser doesn't have redeeming qualities, and the bass is still good. It's just noticeable that the R50X and the entire R70 line has more bass overhead. That does include the new HD505, which is much more close to the original 560S than any other headphone here. They just kind of, refined it a little bit. So the R50X, the bass is great. The mid-range tuning is much more forward, the upper mids and low treble. This sounds bright, and it's kind of like a spirit child of the ATH-R3000, which is even brighter, and in the 4000 hertz is even more colored. There's a really sharp peak at 4K. I've talked about that with the ATH-R3000, but what made that one special is the technicality, performance, and resolution. It's like the dynamic that it has the resolution of the higher end HiFi planar magnetic headphones, which is pretty awesome for a dynamic to do that. I love this headphone with EQ, so I just wanted to call that out. The R50X, it is brighter. It's a touch shouty, it's a touch harsh, but it's minor, and it only really exposes that kind of faint graininess to it if you turn up the volume loud, and there's a loud part of the music. If you're listening to a relaxed song and you crank this, it sounds incredible. Like, this is just an alternative to what you get from Sennheiser products. It's very musical, and I think the technical performance is what makes this kind of special. It sounds highly resolving. It sounds more resolving than the HD-560 and HD-505. The HD-600, 650, 6XX sounds a little bit more technical and resolving, with it still, to me, the best mid-range I've heard on a headphone under $500, but it doesn't have the same bass impact, and the stage is much more compressed than even the R50. So if you can't tell where I'm going with this, this is a super solid performer. And stick around for the gaming section, because I think that'll help explain some more stuff as well that I'm not touching on now. But the general take of this isn't really half the price, it's half the price, but not half the performance of the R70. These guys, if you have more powerful amps, you like to turn it up a little bit, you want a more relaxed but wide sound presentation, the lushness, the richness of the R70 lineup is still incredible. I love them for that. There are just certain songs where I actually like the more tight, punchy, impactful presentation that the R50 has because of that more forward mid-range. It's just a different presentation. If you like synths, you like listening to Daft Punk, for example, this thing is just awesome, awesome value. Now, I kind of touched on these guys, but I didn't touch on the AR5000. The AR5000 is kind of a good blend between the Sennheiser products and the Audio-Technicas. It sounds a little bit more relaxed. It's kind of like a wider staging HD6XX that doesn't have the same mid-range tonality performance. It has a little bit more of a scoop, which is why it sounds so wide, but it still has the relaxed pinner region, more comparable to the R70X. It's just a more subdued, thicker, warmer sound. This one, the R70, the edge of the R70xa over the AR5000 is it does resolve just slightly better. And I think the bass is more dynamic and punchy, whereas this is a warmer, more pillowy bass, but it still sounds fantastic. Tons of overhead there, and I still think it's a worthy listen. When it comes to gaming, this is where Audio-Technica is just going to kill it. And this is going to come down to ergonomics and price preferences, etc. But the R70xa is more of your end game gaming performance if you like to turn it up. Because of that relaxed 4 to 5K, which is a very common area for gunshots, airstrikes, etc., that is less fatiguing to listen to on the R70, so you can turn it up more. You can still hear footsteps crystal clear, and then you're not punished by some of the louder sounds. The R50, when the sounds aren't as crazy and there's not like chaos in terms of gunfire and airstrikes, has a better sound presentation at moderate volumes for FPS gaming. So if you also play immersive gaming, single player gaming, or single, like you're playing Cyberpunk, for example, then the R70xa is going to sound more immersive because of that relaxed nature. This is still excellent, and when I factor in the whole technicality performance and micro details and all this other stuff, they honestly beat the 560 and the 505 and the 560. That is a crazy feat, because even in my Discord server, the HD 560 has been like the top recommendation under 200. Honorable mention to the Tiger 300R, which I should have grabbed, but it's not at the same level both in sound quality tuning and overall resolution. This sounds so much more clear. It really does sound more like a $300 plus headphone when it comes to resolution, and that's the party trick. You can always EQ it. Because this is so easy to drive as well, you can plug this into a gaming controller and get plenty of volume. And with this flat grill, even though you're not buying like a special microphone kit for it, you can use the Antlion mod mic and turn this into a gaming headset. I'll have a link in the description below for that in case you want an onboard mic. But I am crazy happy with the gaming performance of this. I played a lot of Call of Duty and then recorded the clips and started A/Bing so I could have some repetition. Comfort is great, but it was seriously so consistent that I could hear the footsteps more cleanly and pinpoint it while still having a good stage and immersion. The HD6XX had pretty good footstep resolution, but the soundstage is super compressed. I think what it really comes down to is the R50X, the R70xa for new stuff, and the AR5000 are my top 3 headphones under 300 for like an analog headphone for gaming right now. They killed it in gaming performance, and to me it's probably one of the highest recommendations I can give in this price, provided all the other things I explained kind of line up with what you're looking for. Now, just in case you were curious about the ATX3000 performance in gaming, that has been one of my top picks of any price for Call of Duty, up there with the Hi-Fi Aria Organic. The technical performance, and especially after EQ, is just awesome for gaming, in addition to the comfort and all that. But these guys are super close. Like, honestly, the R50X, I can't stress this enough, the value that you get on technical clarity and overall EQ ability, how easy it is to drive, etc. That's why it's harder to justify more expensive headphones exclusively for gaming. It's stuff like this that just kills it. Now, I will be talking about the HD505 in an upcoming video. I just didn't have it long enough to really do like an in-depth thing yet. But after a few days of listening and comparing it to these, which I've had for much longer, the 505 is literally just a better version of the 560. It has the same technical performance of it. It's not necessarily a higher resolving driver, but they did tune the harshness just a little bit, so it comes across a little bit smoother. They reduced the clamping force and improved the headband comfort. So whether that's worth $100 more over the older 560S or not is up to you. But purely if you're just A-Bing the two, the 505 is a better model. At the end of the day, I think what Audio-Technica pulled off from a sound quality perspective is still great. The R70X always had kind of high expectations because the original R70X has been solid. The XA, to me, made some necessary improvements in sound quality that does make it seem like a better performing headphone overall. I think ergonomically and the chassis choices are going to be the biggest thing to consider. I like that the pads are a little bit bigger, but I wish they made these with just slightly larger pads, both width, height, and depth, to just accommodate a larger amount of ears, because I think that's the only real drawback with these. It's not so much on the technical performance and sound quality for the money, because frankly, this was always competitive. Now it's a little bit better. And then you have an R50X that's seriously good and has so much potential for tuning and overhead, especially if you're pushing it at higher volumes. For $160 is just great. I think the better deal between the two of these is the R50X, but it is a little bit shoutier. So, just keep that in mind if you're deciding between the two. With that being said, thank you so much for watching the review. I hope you found what you were looking for, and if you did, don't forget to like and subscribe so I can see you at the next video. Links in the description below if you want to purchase these. If not, just get them wherever you like if you decide this is for you. With that being said, thanks again, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.